Hello, how are we all? I hope you're all good. So I'm coming to you live because every time I come on here and I speak about shadow work, I get so many messages, and I thought, the easiest thing to do, I've just completed, or I should say finished, a masterclass that I delivered for another coaches community all on shadow work. And I thought, what? So many people will maybe see me or they see it online, someone referring to shadow work and how powerful shadow work is. So I thought the easiest thing to do would be to come on here just for a few short minutes and actually explain what shadow work is, because you've probably heard me say this if you follow me, like shadow work is the work that has completely transformed my entire life and business over these last 12 to 18 months. It's the work that took me from a place in my life and business where I felt like I was struggling. I felt like there was an invisible wall that I couldn't break through. I knew there was a lot of unseen things that were holding me back, but no matter how hard I tried to push and motivate myself and through action, I just couldn't break through that invisible wall. And that essentially is because my shadow was stopping me and blocking me from moving forward. So what I want to do in this live video is just really speak to you about what the shadow is, so that you can understand how the shadow actually unfolds in your day-to-day life, the role the shadow plays, but also how you can start to bring awareness to your shadow. So as I've mentioned, I've just completed a masterclass there, and I've had a lot of requests to learn more about what shadow work is for people that don't understand it. So let me know under this video if you would like to learn more about what the shadow is and the power of shadow work. Then send me a message, because I'm actually thinking about putting together a masterclass where I can actually dive into this deeper. Obviously in this live, I'm just going to do a basic overview of what shadow is. So essentially, what is the shadow? For those of you that have never heard of this term before, it can sound a little bit dark and murky, right? The shadow. And the shadow is not bad. The shadow is basically everything that lies outside of our conscious awareness. It's the traits, the desires, the impulsions, the emotions, and the behaviour patterns that we've pushed into the unconscious because they didn't fit in with the version of how we were told to be in society. And our shadow can include emotions like anger, jealousy, rage, grief, traits like neediness, selfishness, arrogance, laziness, procrastination. A lot of my clients will hear me speak about our different parts and how our shadow can be our procrastinator parts. It can be our perfectionist parts. It can be the parts of us that have formed in different seasons of our life, quite often childhood, that have formed to protect us. So the shadow isn't bad, but quite often where the shadow can become problematic is where the shadow is operating in a way that stops us from ultimately becoming the version of us that we want to be. So whether that's the version of us who wants to create happiness, wholeness, and abundance in a relationship. So the shadow for me in relationships, the way that had formed, just to give a really tangible, open, and also vulnerable and honest example, was hyper-independence. For so much of my life, the patterns that had been taught to me that it was unsafe to be supported, whether that meant in a dynamic of like child and parent, or whether it meant in a romantic relationship, or whether it meant in a relationship with other women. So the patterns in my own life had modeled and shown to me that it was unsafe to be supported. So I had developed this real unhealthy, very unseen, most people would never even had known that this was something. I wasn't even consciously aware of this. Hyper-independence was a trait that was very predominant for me. And what that hyper-independence essentially stopped me from experiencing was sorry, my eyelash is like poking me in the eye, was the abundance and the safety and the support that I really desired to experience in not only my romantic relationship, but also in the relationships with people around me, and friendships and professional relationships. Like, unbeknown to me and also other people, I had this core belief that it wasn't safe to be supported. So I was very hyper independent. I'll do it by myself, all by myself. And that was the shadow in forms. That's an example for you of how your shadow shows up. It can be traits like hyper independence. It can also be traits like jealousy, envy, anger. And none of these traits none of these emotions are bad. Like, we all from time to time will feel the full spectrum of emotions. I always say to my clients, in order to feel love, abundance, joy, happiness, we also have to be able to experience the lower vibrational emotions like, anger, sadness, disappointment. Like, none of these are bad, and it's all part of the experience that is life. But where it becomes problematic is if you're someone that more than often is experiencing these lower vibrational emotions, and it's really running the show for your life, and this is the shadow in its form of how it's playing out in your life. And these traits don't just disappear through shadow work. Like, what happens is, throughout our lives, these traits get suppressed and repressed, and they're stored in your unconscious. So if you didn't already know, 95% of who we are is unconscious. So what that basically means is, day to day, our reactions, our behaviours and our responses and our actions and thoughts are formed from 95% of our unconscious mind, which means when we go to try and create change, we're only working with 5% of our conscious mind. And this is why, sorry, my eyelash is still poking me in the eye. This is also why creating change can feel really challenging, not because we're lazy, unmotivated, or we don't desire to create change in whatever facet of life. It's because we're only working with 5% of our conscious mind. And this is where the shadow gets repressed and suppressed. And this is the part of us that influences the majority of our behaviours, choices and emotional reactions, especially when we're triggered. So if you are someone, for example, when you were a child, you expressed anger and you were told, or even emotion, don't be sad, don't cry, don't be so aggressive. You might then become an adult who then learns to suppress your emotions because you were taught as a child that it wasn't safe to express. And that's not healthy, because as I said, there's no bad parts and there's also no bad emotions. It's knowing how to work with the emotion that comes up, and rather than react to it, we respond through conscious awareness. And quite often in our societal culture, especially for men, but also for women, we're taught that emotion is bad. Don't show vulnerability, don't show emotion. When actually, I believe, and if you follow any of Brené Brown's work, vulnerability is our greatest superpower. And I always say to my children, whenever they get emotional, sad, or even angry, I don't tell them to suppress it. I sit with them and I ask them, where do you feel it? And my little girl who's 8, she so beautifully expresses her emotions. And when she feels sad, she's sad. When she's angry, she's angry. When she's happy. But instead of shaming her for that anger and that sadness, I ask her, where is it coming from? The same way when you're an adult, anger, sadness, disappointment, there's a source of where that's coming from. So more than often with my 8-year-old little girl, when she's angry or sad, it's because she's tired, she's hungry, or something has happened to upset her. So rather than shame her in that moment, it's about bringing awareness to what's causing that emotion. And the same goes for adults, but we're not taught how to express our emotions. And this is where the shadow forms, because we learn to basically stay safe, loved, and be accepted. We learn that we have to repress parts of ourselves and our emotions because we're taught that it's a threat to connection and also to survival. And then this becomes our persona. We're somebody who armors up, we mask our emotions, and what that stops us and blocks us from doing is experiencing the connection that we want, whether it's in a romantic relationship. Have you ever been in a relationship where you're not fully expressing yourself? So instead of saying to your partner when they upset you, you then give them the silent treatment and you act almost like a toddler who is stroppy and annoyed. And that never resolves the issue, right? Because unless you actually openly communicate about the action or behaviour that made you sad or upset you, then it puts you in a perpetual cycle where there's a lack of understanding between both parties and people. Now, the beautiful thing about shadow work is it shines a mirror up to yourself, and you get to understand these emotions, these traits, these characteristics that have been suppressed, and you start to bring awareness to how they are unfolding in your day-to-day life. So how does the shadow show up in relationships? As I'd mentioned there, it stops you from being able to experience the connection that you want in relationships because you're not able to speak your truth. In a business, for example, it stops you from going after what you want because there's a shadow part of you, maybe that potentially it feels unsafe because maybe there's an unconscious belief that if you are more successful, wealthy, healthy, happier, more abundant, then people won't love you. Maybe you have this unconscious behaviour pattern or emotion or belief that it doesn't feel safe to go after what you want. That maybe when you grew up, you were taught that money is the root of all evil and that it's bad to want more abundance when it comes to financial abundance. So these are all parts of our shadow, and quite often some of us may be consciously aware of some of these thoughts and beliefs that we hold, but more often than not, and this was the case for me when I started to self-sabotage in my own business and also in my life, I wasn't consciously aware of the shadow parts of me that were causing this. And I have been someone that over the last decade, I've created a lot of success in business, and I had 7 years of exponential growth. And when my business started to go like that, instead of being able to take the action and do the things that ultimately would create the results that I wanted, I felt like there was an invisible wall, and that was my shadow. It was the unconscious parts of me that were blocking me. And it wasn't until I went on a journey of doing the deeper inner work through shadow work, where not only have I been able to blow up my business, launch a new business, but also, and I say this and this is the honest truth, I've been able to create results from a place of flow and ease. I'm not building a business now and running towards goals from a place of pain and sacrifice. And that was my story for 7 years. I was able to create a lot of success through pain and sacrifice, running from the past. And I got to a stage in my life where I was like, I don't want to create chaos in order to create results in my life and business. Like, I was in a really healthy, safe place in my life and in a relationship. And I wanted to create from a place of ease and desire. And shadow work is the thing that helped me do that, because it enabled me to bring what was unconscious to the conscious, and from that place create new thought patterns, new awareness, which created new actions, which created a new reality. And this is the power of shadow work. So everyone has a shadow. We have a shadow all within us. It's the parts of ourselves that potentially we don't like about ourselves. They form through childhood, but also adulthood, and quite often it's social conditioning, where we learn some parts are good and some parts are bad. So what are some of the unconscious behaviour shadow patterns that you could maybe relate to? Perfectionism, people-pleasing, overachieving, avoidance. These are all strategies to avoid facing the uncomfortable parts within us. It might be things like self-sabotage, so repeating patterns. So maybe you're someone who wants to get healthy and fit, but you constantly and continually sabotage. It's not because you're lazy or unmotivated or don't want a healthier body. It's because your shadow is stopping you. The unconscious, subconscious parts, your upper limit doesn't believe you're worthy. 95% of who you are up until this point is ingrained. So this is where the shadow comes in, and it's the power of shadow work, because what we do through shadow work, so what I do with my clients through shadow work is we bring awareness to the unconscious, and we're able to, through that, then create, as I'd mentioned, new thoughts, new actions, new outcomes, new behaviour patterns, and a new reality as a result. So the goal is not to eliminate the shadow, but it's to bring awareness to it, to reclaim the parts of ourselves that we've disowned, and to integrate those parts with love, with compassion, and with understanding. And it's been able to actually create wholeness in our entire identity, so that we can start to show up more authentically, freely, and powerfully. So shadow work is the work that I believe, like for me, I believe that success in life and business, I used to say 80, but I believe it's now 90% energy and mindset. and who you're being rather than just what you're doing. Because at the end of the day, we're living in the age of information now, right? And there is an abundance of information at our fingertips. You can be someone that invests in all of the courses, does all the programs, but you still don't create the change that you want in your life and your health and your relationships and your business and your finances. Not because you don't know the blueprint, because if it was about information, we would all have done it by now. But the reason that you've been unable to create the change you want is not because you're broken, and I want you to know that. It's because your shadow and who you believe you are when it comes to your identity. If you don't believe that you're someone who is worthy of the things that you want to create, you will continually self-sabotage, because our shadow is designed to keep us safe, not to expand. So whenever your body and your nervous system, your unconscious mind deems something as unsafe, it will push it away. So I'm going to leave it there. There's so much that I can talk about when it comes to shadow and shadow work, but it is the work that has changed so much for me, and I'm seeing the magic of this work unfold every single day in my clients' lives. If this is something that you want to learn more about, I am a certified shadow alchemy practitioner. I'm trained in a unique modality called the Shadow Alchemy Toolkit, and the different sort of techniques and modality of coaching that I can work with is inner child, it's parts work, it's shadow work. It is the work that enables people, I wholeheartedly believe, to create the change and transformation that they want in all aspects of their life. And if you're interested in learning more about the power of shadow work, if you're curious about how your shadow is forming in your day-to-day life, then drop me a message. I'm going to be running a masterclass in the next week. I'm going to put a date out after today because I've had so many people message me recently about shadow work. But I also have an upcoming program that starts on the 8th of July called the Identity Alchemy Experience, and this is a 3-week immersion experience where I'm going to be working with clients specifically on their shadow and enabling them to bring awareness to the parts of themselves right now that might be blocking them from creating the abundance that they want in whatever area of their life. So if you're interested in either of these things, then drop me a message with the word shadow work or comment below. Let me know if this made sense, if it resonated, if it's given you a bit of an aha around what shadow is. And I hope that this has brought awareness to the fact that we all have a shadow. The shadow is not bad, it's part of who we are. It's not about shaming the shadow, it's not about, pushing the shadow down. Not all shadow parts are dark. We have the parts of ourselves, our confidence, our leadership, our radiance, our sexuality, our charisma, these parts that we want to shine the light on. So really learning about the psychology of the shadow invites us into this process that's really brave and compassionate, and it's a process of building emotional maturity, self-awareness, personal power, which then leads to ultimately deep, lasting transformation. And I'm just going to leave you with this. When you stop hiding from yourself, you stop needing to perform for others, for the external world. This is when you build not only unshakable self-trust, confidence, personal power, magnetism, leadership. Like shadow work, I wholeheartedly believe, and I am not the only one, there has been thousands of psychologists and experts. Carl Jung is one of them who has coined, like, shadow work is the gateway to unshakable self-trust, radical self-ownership, and genuinely becoming the most expressive version of yourself. So if you've been on this journey for me over the last couple of years and you've watched me go from a place where I was suppressed and in a place of fear and shame and just not the most vibrant, magnetic version of myself, and you're wondering, what's her secret? There's no secret. It wasn't an overnight process. This has been a process, a good 12 to 18 month process of working with my shadow and understanding it and really creating new awareness, new thoughts, new behaviour patterns, a new identity, and stepping into the version of me now. So I am going to leave you with that. Please let me know if this has been helpful, if you resonate, if you're interested in anything that I mentioned. Drop me a message, comment below, and I will speak to you all soon. Lots of love.